Salam sejahtera, bersama saya Rizal Zulkafli dan ini Bisnes Awani. Kerajaan pada Isnin mengumumkan kenaikan tarif elektrik sebanyak purata 15% berkuat kuasa 1 Januari 2014. Susulan daripada pengumuman berkenaan, wujud pelbagai reaksi daripada pengguna termasuk daripada industri sendiri. Menurut Bank Negara, susulan daripada kenaikan berkenaan, inflasi Malaysia dijangka akan meningkat kepada 3% pada 2014. Bagi sektor sasaran getah pula, kenaikan ini dijangka akan meningkatkan kos mereka. Untuk melihat kepada kenaikan tarif ini, sebab dan kesannya kepada industri dan pengguna, Bisnes Awani akan berbincang bersama tetamu Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Suruhanjaya Tenaga, Datuk Ahmad Fauzi Hassan, Naib Presiden Persekutuan Pengilang-Pengilang Malaysia, Datuk So Chubun, dan juga Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif My Power Corp, Datuk Abdul Razak Majid. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Now, first of all, let's talk about the big question, which is why the tariff increase. Maybe, Datuk, you'd like to start first?
Yes, hello. The tariff has been a subject of review continually by the government and the regulators, Suruhanjaya Tenaga, and there are various components that go into the calculation of any tariff. For the electricity sector, of course, fuel forms a very important, very significant component of tariff, and of course there is the non-fuel portion, which is also to be considered from time to time. Over the last year, we have experienced, or the system has experienced, some shortfall in gas supplies, necessitating the government to approve that Petronas should build a facility to import natural gas or liquefied natural gas from other countries abroad. And these are being procured at market prices. And this is really to supplement the shortfall that we have had in the indigenous gas supply system through the pipelines. So hence, with this new price, new component coming to the system, it is a primary reason why the government had to consider the price adjustment as we see today. Obviously, the other factor is we need to have adjustments over the last 3 years. Copper prices, aluminium and steel, which are very significant metal components to the industry, these also move according to market prices around the world. And Tenaga, being the principal utility, they have had to buy this at market prices from elsewhere. And you see that Tenaga will have to bear this additional cost, and hence I think they have put up a proposal that they need to have this adjustment so that they will remain fairly neutral in their cash flow positions going forward.
Dr. Fauzi, maybe you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I would like to reinforce on the issue of depleting resources actually. If you compare what we are bringing into the peninsula through the pipeline for the power sector, now it's about 2,000 cubic feet per day of gas. Out of that 2,000 now, about 600 cubic feet per day is being imported actually. We used to be supplying all of these from our indigenous resources, but that was more than 10 years ago. But over time, over the last 5 years, the volume that has been imported from Indonesia, Thailand and Vietnam has been increasing to meet the burgeoning demand that has basically happened because the cost of gas is so cheap that it's the cheapest fuel in the market now. So in order to address this issue of trying to conserve our depleting resources, we need to send the right message to the consumers that please don't waste. Please, this is very valuable resources. If we don't use it carefully and conserve and look into efficiency in our processes, pretty soon we'll be running out of gas actually. So this is very, very important that we send the right message. Yeah.
Just now, you two gentlemen mentioned two things, which is the procuring gas for generation of electricity. How much would that contribute to the overall generation of electricity right now in terms of the components, say for example gas, coal? How much would gas contribute, and maybe coal? Maybe you have the breakdown of that as to the, for the generation.
This moves from time to time. At the moment, we can say about 55% or so is generated out of gas fuel. Maybe about 40% or just over from coal, and we have about 5% of indigenous hydro, and the rest will have to be made up from little distillates, and of course we have a small component of renewable energy also coming to the system. So that means that the huge component of gas, either if you have sufficient from indigenous sources, that's okay, but if you don't, then you have to supplement, because the power sector has invested quite a lot in gas plants or generation plants which are being fired by gas. So if you don't have sufficient gas, you cannot generate enough, and therefore there will be a shortfall in the total supply of electricity to the system.
Okay.
So that's why I think we need to have a balance of fuel, and the government's decision to balance between the coal, the gas and the oils and hydros are quite in order to maintain a certain level of security to the power system.
Okay, we're also joined by Datuk Saw Chu Boon, the Vice President of the FMM. Datuk, maybe you would like to comment on the tariff increase, because I think we've heard quite a strong statement by FMM recently following the announcement of the tariff increase to start in January 1st, 2014. Maybe you would like to add to that, or you'd like to say something about that?
I think no businesses like increase in costs, because any increase in costs will affect profitability and competitiveness. And in this case, the announcement by the government of a double-digit growth in electricity rates was quite a high increase. Manufacturing plants as electricity as part of their cost could range from a few percent to over 10%. Some energy-intensive industries could consume 15 to 20%, for example. And of course, with this increase in cost, what manufacturers have to do is either to pass on, and it's not always easy to pass on the additional cost, especially about half of our members depend on the export market. And the export market is not an easy market to immediately increase price due to competitive reasons. And therefore, they have to look for ways to mitigate this cost, for example, by being more efficient, by installing energy efficiency equipment. It needs a bit of time. But what is of greater concern to the manufacturing industry is this increase in electricity cost has come at a time when there have been several increases in cost of doing business. This year we have had minimum wage, with extension of retirement age, we had the increase in petrol price. This all adds to the cost. And we believe there's an impending increase in gas price, and various ministries are trying to introduce various schemes such as unemployment insurance, such as payment of cess, and the GST is coming. And you will notice in the papers various councils are hiking up their rate, and all this adds up to the cost of doing business. Individually, they might appear small, but you add them together, it could be huge. This is where we are concerned. Whether the government should look at it a bit more holistically, so that we do not render our industry uncompetitive, and we do not render the country unattractive for foreign investments. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any subsidy rationalization, but the gradual implementation, well-planned implementation is important.
Now, what do you mean by well-planned implementation and gradual implementation? Is there a timeline on how this would actually be good for the manufacturing sector? Say, for example, 6 months or 3 months. Are we looking at something like that? Because I think one of the main concerns was the fact that it was announced 1 month or less before the implementation. And I think Datuk mentioned that the previous time there was a tariff hike, which is 2 days before the implementation. Is there a way where we can meet halfway when it comes to subsidy rationalization and also making cost of business competitive in Malaysia? Let's talk about that after the commercial break.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll take a commercial break dan kita akan kembali selepas ni. Bertemu kembali, kita membincangkan susulan pengumuman kenaikan tarif elektrik yang diumumkan oleh kerajaan pada Isnin lalu yang akan berkuat kuasa pada 1 Januari 2014 bersama dengan Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Suruhanjaya Tenaga Datuk Ahmad Fauzi Hassan, Naib Presiden Persekutuan Pengilang-Pengilang Malaysia Datuk Saw Chu Bun dan juga Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif My Power Corp Datuk Abdul Razak Majid. Coming back to the question just now, is there a halfway point where you can meet between subsidy rationalisation and also making sure that the businesses remains competitive? Dato'?
I'd just like to take us back about 3 years ago when the first time the government introduced this thing about subsidy rationalisation. This would not apply not just to the fuel or to the power sector, but to various other services and commodities that is being supplied to the public. So at that time, I think it was already recognised that the gas price that was being supplied by Petronas seemed to be below market price, and the government was quite intent to try to bring it up closer to the market level, yet to be defined though, but then that would be more in line with international practices, and in the longer term, it would tend to try and push the country up to a higher level of efficiency. Especially what Dr. Fauzi said, that we have to be mindful that this is a non-renewable energy source, gas. Therefore, we have to be very careful, very prudent as to how we consume in the best possible manner, that to apply that most efficiently for the growth of the country. That was 3 years ago, but going forward now, I think the government has made several attempts trying to meet all sectors, all stakeholders, whether it is the consumer groups or the industries or commercial users, on the probable implementation of this 3 ringgit per 6 months hike in gas price, in trying to push it to a more market reflective price. So that has been declared. I think in some respects, some industries were already preparing themselves for this adjustment. What was not probably made known was when was it to be implemented and by how much. But I think now the time has come that the government realizes that if they continue not doing any price or a tariff adjustment, the government would have to bear the burden of this subsidy, which is quite substantial in terms of government or national budget. Hence, I think the approach that the government has decided upon at this time is, going forward, the businesses and all consumers will have to adjust to this new pricing regime, and hopefully we will turn to a more conservative or more prudent kind of consumption behavior that is befitting the industry which uses a non-renewable source, especially for power.
Your comment on that, Dr. Saw?
Yeah, I think I like to stress 3 points with regard to this. First of all, Dr. Razak did mention that the government needs to move to near market price. The question we asked about implementing this rationalization of subsidy is, the government should work out a plan where are we going to, and then decide on how long we are going to implement this rationalization.
If there's a plan, would it be easier for manufacturers or for businesses?
If you have a plan, if you implement, we have had very significant subsidies for many years, and you cannot correct this overnight in a year. I would guess, depending what the amount is, time period of about 5 years would be a good period to ease in this change and allow the industry to cope, to become competitive. So firstly, the government must have a plan and announce it. How is this increment going to take place, and stick to it? Because once you keep on postponing it, nobody believes that you're going to do it. Then you have a problem. You have to stick to the plan. Then the second point I want to make is, when we are talking about energy, all our energy suppliers are monopoly suppliers. So to be credible, these monopoly suppliers must not enjoy excessive profits, fair but not excessive, and they must demonstrate that they are efficient, because consumers are not prepared to pay for inefficient. And the third point I like to make is, whilst we recognize that the government is having fiscal pressures on its budget, it appears that the government is only focusing on broadening its tax base to increase its revenue and reducing its cost by removing subsidies. The government should also look at its operational cost, its wastage, its leakage. Every time you increase the price of any commodity, the consumers, the public, the industry have to tighten the belt. The government must tighten their belt together with us.
Okay, Dato' Fauzi, maybe you have something to add to that?
Yeah, on the part of the regulator like us, we are always looking at ways on how to improve the efficiency of the industry, right from in case of electricity supply, from generation down to the supply end of the supply chain. And we have introduced many initiatives. For instance, if anybody wants to plan up a new generation capacity into the system, they have to participate in a bidding process. That was implemented about 3 years ago. And since we have done that, I think there are now about 5 exercises have already been completed, and at each stage of that process, within the 5, we have managed to reduce the levelized cost of generating electricity and injecting it into the grid. So here, when you talk about competitiveness, we are trying to extract as much as possible the inefficiencies out of the whole supply chain, right from the supply end to the demand end. You know, at the demand end, we introduced recently last year what is called minimum energy performance standards of equipment that are used by consumers, especially the domestic and commercial consumers, which means that these 5 categories of equipment, they have to have a certain minimum level of efficiency before they can be imported and manufactured and sold into the country.
Are these household products?
Yeah, mostly household products.
Yeah. Okay. Appliances. Sorry. But we are also doing for things like motors, for instance, which is very much used in the industries. You know, so basically that is basically trying to improve the competitiveness of the utility industries, right? And when they can be competitive and efficient, they can offer very competitive rates to the consumers in the industrial, commercial, and domestic sectors. Has that bear fruit so far?
Yes, we have managed to bring down the cost of supply, you know, and we also are looking at ways and means to reduce losses in the system. Right? For instance, if you look at our losses rate now in the supply chain, it's between 9 to 9.5%, which is basically comparable to those developed countries, you know, meaning that whatever is being generated, about 9% or 9.5% is being lost to various technical and non-technical ways, you know. So all this we are looking at in order to improve the efficiency and competitiveness of the supply industry, be it electricity as well as the pipe gas industry.
Okay, we have to take another short break, but when we come back, let's talk about the myth that has been going on since the announcement of the tariff increase, and we'll address those. Because I heard that the 52.8% power reserve margin, and also moving forward, looking at renewable energy, because I think you mentioned just now 55% is gas, 45% is coal, and only 5% is from hydropower. How do we increase that, and in order so that when we move forward, when there's more energy demand, we are more prepared for that? Let's talk about that in a while. Dan kita akan berehat sekejap kembali lepas ni. Bertemu kembali, kita bersama dengan Suruhan Cahaya Tenaga, FMM dan juga My Power Corp membincangkan tentang susulan pengumuman kenaikan tarif elektrik. Let's talk about the myth that has been going on, where the IPP is receiving subsidies, and also there's a 52.8% power reserve margin. Is this all true, or is there truth to it?
Again, we have to track back on the development of the industry. I think in the late 1997-98, we all experienced this downturn in the economy, and of course there was an overhang, a surplus of capacity. But soon after that, there was a very sharp increase in demand that had sort of required the government to put in some capacity in anticipation of the growth of the pickup in demand. But then it moderated out a bit, and that was why we had that about 50% of excess margin around about 2004, 2005. But it's no longer true anymore, because every year we consume like 4 to 5% of growth, and that meant that we had consumed this reserve margin. Every year it meant that we were reducing from that 50-odd% down to where we are now at about 30%, or just on a high 20s. In terms of planning, we would like to have something like 20 to 25% of reserve margin, so we don't have much more to drop. So it is quite a myth to say that we have been maintaining 52% all the time. It was just one occurrence, and after that we have been declining to what we think as a fair planning margin for the country, which must hold about 20-25% margin.
Dr. Raja, briefly on the IPP receiving subsidies, is this true or is this not true?
Well, that's definitely not true, because we have seen numbers, we have been checking on this periodically, and we know that IPPs do not make any margin out of the gas subsidies that the government or Petronas provides. It is just that the government's way to control the input price of fuel to the system by sort of gazetting or controlling the price of gas at a certain number, like 640 ringgit per million BTU previously, and then after that they jump on to about currently 1370. This is to enable a fairly cheap level of production or generation of electricity, which TNB will buy, and then that will be transmitted or supplied to the customer at that very reasonable price.
Okay, Dr. Fauzi, on the topic of renewable energy, we're looking at 55% of energy from gas, 45% from coal, 5% from hydro. Is there a plan to increase maybe hydro to 20 or 30% to reduce the cost of importing gas in the future when we see more energy demand? Maybe briefly on that.
Yeah. We are always looking at ways and means in order to make our mix diversified as much as possible. You mentioned about 55%, but actually in reality last year we generated on gas using about 45% only based on gas.
This is a huge portion, right?
Instead of using 55% of our installed capacity, because of the constraints in gas supply, we couldn't generate on gas. So we had to use diesel and fuel oil. And gas only constituted about 45% only. In the generation mix last year. So basically gas is going to be a very, very challenging option for us to go on gas, and that's why we are looking at even coal and also clean energy like hydro, which you mentioned just now. Of course, when you talk about hydro, we are always looking at our vast resources in Sarawak, in Bakun and Baram and similar areas there, to bring it to the peninsula for us to expand. And we intend to seriously pursue that. In fact, we have already seriously pursued that, and maybe after 2020 we should be able to get some of those hydro resources from there to generate electricity for the peninsula.
Dr. Shaw, finally.
Yes. I think the government should be commended for starting this renewable energy fund to look at other forms of renewable energy. It was started at 1%. But having said that, so soon after the fund has been started up, it has been increased to 1.6%. Well, 0.6 may not seem big. When we, again, as you add up all the other costs, it just add on costs. I think we should let this fund mature, and our focus, I believe, should be on energy efficiency. We are not one of the most energy efficient nation in the world. And if we focus on energy efficiency, the amount of energy we can save and the amount of carbon emissions we can reduce will be so significant. This is my plea to the government, to concentrate on energy efficiency for the moment.
Now that the tariff will increase 1st January, do you see people being more energy?
They will, but the government must also encourage this. For example, provide assistance to install energy efficient equipment and encourage and through tax. It must be a very concerted move. And I believe 5 to 10% reduction in energy usage countrywide is not impossible.
Thank you very much, Datuk So Chubun, and also Datuk Ahmad Fauzi Hassan and Datuk Abdul Razak Majid from Suruhanjaya Tenaga, FMM, and also My Power Corp for being with us today. We'll talk more, we'll have more discussion. And tadi membincangkan tentang susulan pengumuman kenaikan tarif elektrik yang akan bermula 1 Januari 2014 ni. Saya Reza Zulkafli, salam hormat.